Today I am continuing to read from On the Shortness of Life by Seneca. Reason routs the vices, not one by one, but all together. The victory is final and complete. Do you think that any wise man can be affected by disgrace, one who relies entirely on himself and holds aloof from common beliefs? A disgraceful death is worse than disgrace. Yet Socrates went to prison with the same expression he wore when he once snubbed the 30 tyrants, and his presence robbed even prison of disgrace. For where Socrates was could not seem a prison. Who is so blind to the truth that he thinks it was a disgrace to Marcus Cato that he was twice defeated in his bid for the praetorship and consulship? The disgrace belonged to the praetorship and consulship which were being honored by Cato. No man is despised by another unless he is first despised by himself. An abject and debased mind is susceptible to such insult. But if a man stires himself to face the worst of disasters and defeats the evils which overwhelm others, then he wears those very sorrows like a sacred badge. For we are naturally disposed to admire more than anything else the man who shows fortitude in adversity. When Aristides was being led to execution at Athens, everyone who met him cast down his eyes and groaned, as though it was not merely just a man, but justice himself who was being punished. Yet one man actually spat in his face. He could have resented this because he knew that only a foul-mouthed man would dare to do it. Instead, he wiped his face, and with a smile he said to the magistrate escorting him, "Warn that fellow not to give such a vulgar yawn another time." This was to retaliate insult upon insult. I know some people say that nothing is worse than scorn, and that even death seems preferable. To these I shall reply that exile too is often free from any kind of scorn. If a great man falls and remains great as he lies, people no more despise him than they stamp on a fallen temple, which the devout still worship as much as when it was standing. Dearest mother, since you have no cause on my account to drive you to endless tears, it follows that reasons regarding yourself are urging you to weep. Well, there are two. You are bothered either because you seem to have at least lost some protection, or because you cannot endure the very thought of doing without me. The first point I must touch upon only slightly, for I know that your heart loves your dear ones for themselves alone. Let those mothers reflect on these, who exploit their children's influence with a woman's lack of influence, who, because women cannot hold office, seek power through their sons, who both drain their sons' inheritances and try to get them, who exhaust their sons by lending their eloquence to others, whereas you have taken the greatest pleasure in your sons' gifts and made the least use of them. You have always set a limit to our generosity without limiting your own. While your father was still alive, you actually gave gifts to your wealthy sons. You administered our inheritances as though you were earnestly looking after your own and being scrupulously provident with another's. You were cautious in using our influence as if it were someone else's. And in our spells in office you had no part except your pleasure and the expenses. Your love never had regard for self-interest. Therefore now that your son has been taken from you, you cannot feel the lack of those things which you never thought concerned you when he was safe and sound. I must direct my consolation entirely to that point from which arises the true force of a mother's grief. You say, "So I am deprived of my dearest son's embrace. I can't enjoy seeing him or talking to him. Where is he whose appearance smoothed my troubled brow, to whom I confided all my woes? Where are our conversations of which I never tired? Where are his studies, which I shared with more than a feminine eagerness and more than a mother's intimacy? Where are our meetings? Where is the unfailing boyish glee at the sight of his mother? To all this you add the actual places where we rejoiced together and socialized, and the reminders of our recent life together, which are inevitably the most acute source of mental anguish. For fortune plotted even this cruel blow against you. that only 2 days before I was struck down, she contrived that you should depart tranquil in mind, and fearing no such disaster. It was well that we had lived far apart, and that an absence of some years had prepared you for this blow. By returning you did not gain the pleasure of your son's presence, but you lost the habit of bearing his absence. If you had been away long before, you would have borne the loss more bravely, as the very distance between us would have softened the longing. If you had not gone away, you would at least have had the final pleasure of seeing your son for 2 days longer. As it was, cruel fate so arranged it that you could neither be present at my misfortune nor get used to my absence. But the harsher these circumstances are, the greater the courage you must summon up, and the more fiercely you must fight. As with an enemy you know and have often defeated, your blood has now flowed from an undamaged body. You have been struck exactly where the old scars are. You must not excuse yourself as being a woman who has been virtually given the right to indulge excessively but not endlessly in tears. With this in view, our ancestors allowed widows to mourn their husbands for 10 months, in order to compromise by public decree with the stubbornness of female grief. They did not prohibit mourning, but they limited it. For to be afflicted with endless sorrow at the loss of someone very dear is foolish self-indulgence, and to feel none is inhuman callousness. The best compromise between love and good sense is both to feel longing and to conquer it. You must not pay regard to certain women whose grief, once assumed, was ended only by death. You know some who never removed the mourning dress they put on when they lost their sons. Your life was braver from its start and expects more from you. The excuse of being a woman who does not apply to one from whom all womanly faults have been absent, the worst evil of our time, unchastity, has not numbered you among the majority of women. Neither jewels nor pearls have influenced you. The glitter of wealth has not struck you as the greatest blessing of the human race. You were brought up in a strict, old-fashioned home and never deviated into the imitation of worse women, which is dangerous even to good ones. You were never ashamed of your fertility as if it taunted you with your advancing years. Never did you follow other women who seek only to impress by their looks and hide your pregnancy as if it were an indecent burden. Nor did you destroy the hopes of giving birth by abortion. You did not spoil your complexion by paints and cosmetics. You never liked the sort of garment which revealed no more than it was taken off. In you has been seen that matchless ornament, that loveliest beauty which is not dependent on any time of life, that greatest glory of all, modesty. So you cannot, in order to justify your grief, claim the name of woman from which your virtues have set you apart. You ought to be as immune to female tears as to female vices. Not even women will allow you to waste away from your wound. But they will tell you to get your necessary mourning speedily over with and rise again comforted. By willing yourself to keep in mind those women whose conspicuous courage has ranked them with great men. Fortune reduced Cornelia's 12 children to 2. If you wanted to count Cornelia's bereavements, she had lost 10. If you wanted to appraise them, she had lost the Gracchi. But when those around her were weeping and cursing her fate, she forbade them to accuse Fortune, which had given her the Gracchi as her sons. It was a fitting son of this mother who said in the assembly, "Would you insult the mother who gave me birth?" Yet his mother's words seemed to me much more spirited. The son was proud of the parentage of the Gracchi, the mother of their deaths as well. Rutilia followed her son Cotta into exile and was so single-minded in her devotion that he preferred exile to missing him, and returned home only when he did. And when restored to favor and distinguished public figure, he died. She bore his loss as bravely as she had shared his exile. Nor was she ever seen to weep after his funeral. She showed courage when he was exiled, and wisdom when he died. For nothing stopped her showing her love, and nothing induced her to persist in useless and unavailing grief. It is with women like these that I want you to be numbered. You always imitated their way of life, and you will best follow their example in controlling and conquering your sorrow. I know that this is not something which is in our power, and that no strong feeling is under our control, least of all that which arises from sorrow, for it is violent and violently resists every remedy. Sometimes we want to crush it and swallow down our groans. But through the pretended composure of our features, the tears pour down. Sometimes we divert our mind with public shows of gladiatorial contests, but in the very midst of distractions of the spectacles, it is undermined by some little reminder of its loss. Therefore, it is better to conquer our grief than to deceive it. For if it has withdrawn, being merely beguiled by pleasures and preoccupations, it starts up again, and from its very respite gains force to savage us. But the grief that has been conquered by reason is calmed forever. I am not therefore going to prescribe for you those remedies which I know many people have used, that you divert or cheer yourself by a long or pleasant journey abroad, or spend a lot of time carefully going through your accounts and administering your estate, or constantly be involved in some new activity.